Afternoon, everybody. So it's lesson 12. So assignment 2 was due last night. I will start marking those in the next few days. So what are we doing today? I'm going to go over our final exam requirements, and then we're going to implement file upload functionality. So how do we upload and display images and also attach those files to specific records in our database so that those images can be displayed within our application. To give you an idea what this looks like, here's from my morning class. So we built a movie site so we could attach and display movie posters along with each of them. And I'd also have the ability, when I would go in and add a new record, that I would have the ability to browse and upload and include an image. So we're going to be adding similar functionality today to our PHP-Tune site. For your final exam, so our exam is scheduled 2 weeks from tomorrow. So you do have quite a bit of time to prepare for it. It is scheduled on Tuesday, so not on Monday, in our usual time slot. So same time, but different day of the week. So that's 2 weeks from tomorrow at noon. You will come to the WebEx room, so you must do the exam in that one window. Okay, so the exam will start at 12, much like with our midterm, so you'll still come to the WebEx room. I will go over all the instructions right at noon. I'll be sure to open the WebEx room by 11:50 on that day, so make sure you come, and you can ask questions if you need to during the chat. The format of the exam is practical only, so somewhat similar to the midterm exam, except on a larger scale and without the multiple choice section. There will be different versions of the exam as well, and you will receive a version of the exam at random. So not everybody in the class is going to be doing the same version. The exam will end right at 3 p.m. and you will, much like with the midterm, again, you do not need to run things live. You will just zip and upload your files to D2L, and you must submit by 3 p.m. In order to receive a mark. So you cannot work after 3 p.m. If you haven't submitted any files, then I won't be able to give you a grade. And the exam, it will cover everything done in the course, but the focus will be, there'll be a little more of an emphasis on the lessons since reading week. Obviously, we're still going to have to do some CRUD operations because everything else we do sort of sits on top of an application that performs CRUD. So there will be some CRUD work, but the focus will be on the latter part of the course, so things like authentication, file uploading, and things we've done since our midterm test, error handling, shared files, etc. Does anybody have any questions about the exam? Really? Not one question? I explained it so elegantly and eloquently that everyone's clear on what's going on? Wow. It was a big coffee I had this morning. Yes. Yama? Short answer, yes. So we will have a 4-month break from each other, but we will be back together in September. And at least the plan right now is that we will actually be live in a classroom together. No, Alessio, this is the last week of class of the semester. For the Georgian diploma programs, there are 2 more weeks. But Lakehead semesters are shorter, so this is our final week. No, Ethan, it's only code. There are no question and answers. It is code only. So today is our last class. I know it's kind of weird. We have nothing next week because you'll be in the middle of your exam. I think your exam period maybe starts next weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So the exam for this class, rather than being next week, it's been scheduled for 2 weeks from tomorrow. Oh, your exams start tomorrow. Okay. I'm surprised by that. I didn't think what class is that in, Ethan? Didn't think the Lakehead exam schedule started. Who's the instructor for C#? Okay, it's not. Okay, that's a little bit odd that the exam's this week and not an official exam, but yeah. I don't know if maybe Sujit is, I don't know Sujit, I don't know if they're maybe not familiar with the Lakehead typical protocols, but if your exam's tomorrow, I guess that's one you get out of the way. Yeah, because I guess they've scheduled it. Is that during your regular class time? Okay. All right. Good to know. I might mention that to Ross, so he's aware. I mean, that's allowed. Yeah, a little bit unusual. Usually the exams are scheduled in the official exam period rather than during class time for Lakehead. For the Georgian courses, yeah, typically the last course of the semester is the exam, but that isn't the usual protocol when it comes to. That's why our exam is obviously not during class times. But this is our final class, and we'll be back together again on the 19th. And then again in September. Okay. If you have other questions about the exam that come up during class time, then feel free to use the chat and let me know. So we're going to enable this file upload process so that we can upload files, we can validate them, for example, to make sure we're getting the kind of files we want. And we'll have to do some other checks before we save them. So I'm just going to kind of give you a bit of an overview of the process first. Then we're going to do a little test file upload to just play around and see how it works in PHP. And then we'll integrate it into our PHP Tunes application at the end. We'll sort of do a standalone version first. So file upload allows users of a web application to upload any file on their device, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a computer, to the server itself. Typically so the server can process it in some way. So in this case, my morning class, we allowed image uploads so that we could display images that were related to our data in our database. But a lot of web applications have some kind of file upload capability. Can you think of any other use cases? What other websites do you use that allow you to upload files? Okay, YouTube's a good one. Yep, I use that every day after class. I go into right here, here's Chrome, so I click on create and I upload my videos to our class playlist. That's a great example. Yeah, a job site like Indeed. That's right, Mike. We can attach our resume. Chris said, yeah, any social media. So Instagram, I mean, that's where virtually all the content from something like Instagram, almost all, the entire reason people go there is to see the photos and video that get uploaded, right? So the primary content comes from file uploads. Yeah, Yama says D2L, right? When you submit an assignment, you will attach it often. Yeah, Alex says something like Napster, if it's a web application. Yeah, and GitHub as well, where we can upload files. So here were some of the use cases that I mentioned, that you guys mentioned. So something like social media, a learning management system like Blackboard or D2L, a webmail client like Gmail, where you add an attachment to an email. File uploading is also really common in business practices, things like e-commerce. So for example, customer who has a list of their products, they're starting a new website where they want to sell their products online, and they don't want to manually have to re-enter all of their products. So they might want to take a CSV file or a text file or an Excel spreadsheet and be able to upload and then have our code parse the records in the file and save to the database. Another common use case for this, I had a customer, we built them an e-commerce site, and every day their supplier would ship out dozens and dozens of orders, and they would send my client, they'd send the business owner a spreadsheet which had the tracking number. So the spreadsheet, one column was the order number, and the next column was the tracking number issued by FedEx or UPS or Purolator. And in their busy season, they would ship out, hundreds of orders a day. And my client, the business owner, said to me, I'm not going to pay one of my staff to manually type out all the tracking numbers in, and potentially there have be errors. The suppliers are sending us this spreadsheet. I just want my staff to be able to click browse, upload the file, and I want you to programmatically save the tracking number to each order and email out the customer, hey, here's the link to your order tracking. So that sort of batch processing where users, to prevent manual data entry, they already have some data in a file that we need to get in our database. That's a really common use in the business world for processing file uploads through our web application. So how does it actually work? There's a few components here. Within our form, we need two things. We must include this attribute, and we'll see why when we test it out. In our HTML form tags, we're going to need the attribute ENC type, which stands for encoding type equals multi-part form data. What this attribute does is it will actually convert any file that the user uploads, like a photo for your Instagram account, an assignment for you're submitting to D2L, it will convert that file to binary. So we'll convert it to ones and zeros, and when the file is copied from the client device to the server, it's actually the binary code that travels over the internet. It's not the native file, the PNG or JPEG or zip or PDF or Word doc. It's a binary representation. When that file arrives on the server, it gets converted back into its original format. But it gets converted to binary for the trip. If we don't add this encoding type, that binary conversion never happens. And if the binary conversion never happens, the file doesn't get copied to the server. So imagine what a problem this would be, for example, if this was a form on D2L, and when you went and thought you attached your file and uploaded it, that nothing actually got copied to the server. And then someone like me would go in and say, oh, okay, I see a Keem submission, but there's no file attached here. So that encoding type is critical for this binary conversion and data transfer to happen. Our form also uses an input, just an HTML input, with a type of file. And this will open a directory dialog box where the user can browse their device and choose a file. This is one of the only HTML controls that has any real functionality. Most HTML controls, they're just only there to display content, display and format content. Whereas this actually has a little bit of functionality that we can browse our device. So that's the front end where we're asking the user to pick a file and we're letting them upload. And then our form, when the user submits it, it's going to get posted to the server, and this is where our PHP script is going to take over. So here's how PHP, different web technologies process file uploads a little bit differently. In PHP, when you upload a file, it goes to a directory in the server cache automatically. So it will automatically put any file we upload somewhere in memory, and it's only temporary. It won't stay there forever. By default, if we just leave the file there, eventually it will get removed. I think it's every 20 minutes is the default, but I'm not positive. So why would it be a good idea? Why do you suppose the developers of PHP created their upload script to first save the file somewhere temporary? What's the benefit of storing that file in a cache or a temp folder when it first gets uploaded? Okay, yes, Yama, security. Can you expand a little bit more? So when we ask a user to upload a file, what might we want to do with that file that would be best done if the file lives somewhere temporary first, as opposed to saving it directly to its final destination? Okay, 20 says it allows the developer to check the integrity and type of file before we send it to the database. That's right. And Mike says we're making sure they're not sending malicious software. Yep. Or Dominic, in case it has an error. Yeah, all those reasons. So we want to do, we can inspect the file and we can perform validation on it. So we might check the type. We may want to check the file size. So I had a customer where they needed, in their application, they needed users to upload images, but his staff, for the purposes they were using, those images, if they were any smaller than 100 kilobytes, the images were too small. And if they were larger than 5 megabytes, they were too big. So we wrote a validation script that when those images got uploaded, we made sure that the file size was within the allowable range. And if not, we gave an error to the user. Yeah, Andrew, could be as well. That is true. Generally, cache is. So some of the things that we can check for, we can access. So there is a files collection in PHP. And when a file gets uploaded, it has certain properties that we can access. We can access the file name. That will also give us the extension. There's a type property. Now we're going to try this, but it's very easy to spoof this. So this basically just tells you what the file extension is. It doesn't tell you what the actual file type is, and I'll show you the danger of using this. So we have a better option in the type. We have the size, which is given to us in bytes, not in kilobytes. 1 byte is 1,000. 1,024 bytes is a kilobyte. It's not 1 to 1,000. And then we also have this useful property called TMP_name. This is the location where that file lives temporarily. So we will use these properties when we're checking our file. And so we can use the type attribute, but not recommended. So for example, we want to make sure if our web page is uploading files to a video library, like YouTube, we want to make sure that the file type is not, a Word document or a PDF. If we have restrictions around file size, we can check that. We also often want to ensure the file name is unique before we take that file out of cache and save it to its permanent location. Yeah, Alex, that's a really good question. We will see about that. We're gonna experiment with the type so we can figure that out. Glad you raised that. Why would we want to uniquely name the file? This isn't an absolute requirement, but it's a good idea. Why generate a unique name for a file that gets uploaded? Why don't we just keep the original file name? Yeah, so we don't get duplicates or we don't overwrite the file. And the default behavior in PHP when you upload a file is it will overwrite a file with the same name in that same folder. So imagine the chaos that would cause, like in D2L, if there was no unique file naming. And let's say all of you uploaded a file called assignment2.zip. And every time there was a new upload with that zip file, it would overwrite the previous one. That would be a disaster. So there's different algorithms, different strategies we can use. My preference is to use the session object to help us generate a unique name. But there are other ways you can do it as well. So we're going to use the session and include the user's session ID, which is generated on the server, and we're going to include that in the file name. So that way, if I open 2 separate browsers and I open 2 files with the same name, there will be no file overwriting. Both will be saved with unique names. And at the end of the process, we're going to use this descriptively well-named method that's built, comes with PHP, called move uploaded file. So that takes the file out of the temporary spot in cache and lets us save it to whatever folder we want it to live in permanently, along with any new name that we give it. Now there's a little gotcha here. Every year I teach this class, there's always at least one student who emails me and says, my file uploads work locally, they don't work on the web server. And there's a reason for that. When we write our code properly locally, it's going to work, but on the web server, we have to enable write permissions. So by default, most web servers don't let an anonymous user from a web script create new files. So our file uploads are going to work on our local server, but on AWS, we need to explicitly enable permissions on the folder that we want to upload to. So there's an option here under public permissions, this write permission you see here, it's checked in my screenshot. By default, on AWS, that box is unchecked, meaning scripts can read and execute, but they can't write new files. So in our FTP program in FileZilla, we have the ability to change this permission and also cascade it to subfolders if we need to. We won't need to for our purposes. So unless you enable the permissions on the web server, the file uploads won't work. You won't get any errors. The files just get ignored if that permission is not enabled. These slides are here for you on D2L, file upload slides, so you've got this as a reference. I've also included as an additional reference, here's a tutorial by another developer, 10 minutes on YouTube. So if you want to see someone else's take, I mean, the way they do it is quite similar to the way we're going to implement file uploads in class, but there is an additional resource for you if you'd like. So let's open up our application. So get connected to the VPN. Okay, thanks guys, thank you. I will re-upload. Thank you for letting me know. Aha. Okay. Now the slides should be here. Okay, so they're here now, and you'll be able to reference these during the exam. So make sure you get connected to Openvpn and start up your local Apache server for today. And let's open up our project. Close up most of my files for now. So we're going to just test out, kind of build like a standalone file upload form and save page first that'll be separate from the rest of our PHP tunes. We'll integrate the PHP tunes, we'll integrate the file uploads with the artists later. So I'm actually going to make a new folder here, just in the root. I'm just going to make a folder called test files. I can actually move that. Whoops. That was supposed to be a folder, not a file. I'll try that again. I think I clicked new file. I meant to click new folder. There we now I have a new folder called test files. I actually got this old sample page. I can move it in there. So inside of my test files, I'm going to make a new file here. We'll call it upload test.php. Now this is just going to be a straight HTML form. We're not going to bother with Bootstrap or styling or anything. We just want an HTML. We just want to work on uploading a file. So really basic HTML file. We're going to put on a form with a file upload box and a submit button. So we use our typical method of post. The form will post to a page we'll build next, which will just be called save upload test. And this is where we need to add that encoding type attribute, which is going to do that binary conversion of the file we upload. So we need to set the value of that property to multipart / form data. This is not a PHP thing. No matter what the backend language is, our form will not upload without that encoding type attribute. File uploads just get ignored. Create an input, type equals file. We'll give it a name of file and an ID of file. And a submit button. So a really simple form with only two new things. The encoding type we've never worked with before, and the type equals file we've also never worked with before. So when I load the page in my browser, just looks like this. Now, if you're using, I'm using Firefox. Firefox renders this input type equals file very slightly differently from Chrome and Edge. So if you load your page, in Chrome it says no file chosen. In Firefox it says no file selected with a period. Edge will also say no file chosen. So each browser has a slightly different implementation of that file input. So now I click browse, and this opens a file dialog box where I can pick really any file on my device right now. Submit. Gives me a 404, gives me our 404 page because it's posting to a file called save upload test, which doesn't exist yet. So we're going to have to build this page next. Now, this should be relatively straightforward. It's just HTML with a couple of new properties we haven't explored before. So we can now go and build our save upload test page. And again, I'm going to create this inside of my test files folder. So I'm just going to copy and paste the name from the form action. That way they're guaranteed to be spelled correctly. I'm not even going to bother with any HTML on this page. This is going to be strictly PHP. So we want to reference the uploaded file, file name, file size, temp location, and file type. So these are all the properties we're going to investigate and see if we can display. And then we're going to look at the right way and the wrong way to check the file type. We can say, create a file variable. Now, how do you suppose we would access the file that got uploaded? We have a series of collections here. Yeah, Akeem is right. We're actually, in this case, going to use the files collection. This is a file input, so it's treated differently from the other inputs in the form. And now we reference the name, called it name equals file. We called it file in our form. We'll reference the object called file in the $_files array. It's an associated array of items uploaded to the current script via HTTP post. So if this is an array, file itself is an array with various properties. Actually, I'll just put paragraph tags here. So this is a little easier to read. So we just want to print out the name of the file that got uploaded. It doesn't matter what type of file it is. This should show us the correct file name. So I've browsed, I've got poster.png, submit, gives me that name. I can go and pick another kind of file, Word document, and it gives me the full name, including the file extension. We can display the file size pretty much the exact same way. So the file has an attribute called size. We should be able to display that as well. So if I just resubmit my form, my Word document, 13,273 bytes. My poster is really small. So 1 kilobyte is actually 1,024 bytes. It's not 1,000 even. Our temp location is the variable tmp underscore name. So this is going to tell us where in the server cache, where does that file, where's it living right now? That's not the permanent home, that's just where it got uploaded initially. So I'm just going to refresh. And on my local server, inside of the XAMPP folder, there's a TMP folder for holding temporary files. And in here, it gives the file a name and a .tmp extension. Now, I noticed something interesting about this temporary location. if I resubmit my form, so I'm uploading the same file, same browser session, same computer, each time I upload the file, the temp location is going to be different. So this will be unique every time, even though I'm uploading the same file repeatedly in the same browser. The temp location will change on each upload. Now let's try the file type. So there is a type property we can access. And I'm going to try to upload a few different file types. So here I've got a PNG. I'll just resubmit my form. And my type shows as image PNG. I'll pick a JPEG. It shows as image/JPEG. If I pick a PDF, it shows application PDF. So that would seem to be, looks like it's working. However, Alex, I think you raised an issue. I'm going to do it a slightly different way. So let's say I would do something like this. Let's make a new file in here. I'll do it in. I'm going to make a new text document. Let's say I create a JavaScript file. So I write a JavaScript file, and I want to upload this file, but I want to try to disguise it. I mean, let me upload it like this first, and let's see what happens. So if I upload it just as a JavaScript file, right, the type says, okay, application JavaScript. But if I do this, if I rename my file as an image, so it's actually a script that can execute, but it looks like an image file. What is the type going to show if I upload this? Is it going to tell me it's a JavaScript application, or is it going to tell me it's a PNG? Mike says PNG. Let's see what happens. Gabriel agrees. So if I'm validating based on the file type, this is now, yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it's doing. When we use that type attribute, it's just telling us what the file extension is. It's not actually inspecting the file. So we're not going to do this. Instead, we do it this way. There's a method we can call called Mime content type. This actually inspects the file type itself. So now we pass in the temporary location of the file. So this is going to give us the actual file type, regardless of the extension. So we're going to use Mime content type instead of the type attribute. We're going to call this method. And we pass in the location to that file. So if I refresh my code now and try and upload that file that has a PNG file extension but is not really an image file, it should tell me that it's JavaScript. So I'm going to resend my fake PNG, and it says, okay, well, it doesn't know it's JavaScript, but it does know it's a text document. So if my page only accepts images, we can catch this. If I upload a real image, Mime content type gives me an accurate file type this way, rather than just reading the extension. So that's unsafe. So we don't want to use this type attribute. So now we've checked these. Now I actually want to save the file into the test files directory. So we'll call move uploaded file, which takes two parameters from where to where. From our temporary location to the current folder, and we have the option to rename the file if we want to. We won't for now, so we're going to set the from location, the source as file, TMP name. We're just saving it to the current location, and we will just keep the existing file name. Excuse me. So if I upload something else now, we should actually see that file get added into our test files folder. So if I just refresh here, I now have a copy of the file. Now it says the file's here. If I go into my File Explorer, I can actually confirm inside of test files. So here's the movie poster, uploaded correctly. Now I did also mention that the default behavior is to overwrite. So I will test this out as well. I have two files with the same name, two different files. So I'll show you what happens. So here I've got a file called poster. It's in red. When I save it, I get this image that says iMovie Poster 1. But I have an alternate version of this that's in blue. So the default behavior is of PHP when we call move uploaded file. So by default, we'll overwrite the previous file with the same name. So for this page, it's okay, but when we integrate this into the rest of our code, we're going to want to generate a unique name so that two files will never have the same name. One more little thing that confuses, actually two things I want to show quickly on this, and then we will take a break. I want to show you the importance of the encoding type. I will also upload everything to GitHub shortly. I'm going to run this again, but let's see what happens without that encoding type attribute on my form. And this is an easy thing to miss because the encoding type, it's invisible. You don't see anything different in the browser on the page if that encoding type is missing. So I'm just going to go back. I'll do a refresh. So notice my form, it no longer has the encoding type attribute. So I'll try and pick a file. Just pick an image here, submit, and now everything fails, right? No file got uploaded simply because I took out that encoding type. So the file upload just gets ignored. So on my script here that tries to parse it, everything crashes because all of these variables they don't exist. And we haven't done any checking whether the file got uploaded or not. So that encoding type is absolutely critical if our form is going to include file uploads. So that's one really common error that people make when they start working with file uploads, is they forget this attribute. We'll work with file uploads in ASP.NET in fall, and when we do, we're going to have to put that attribute in our form here as well. One other trick. Very rarely is the file upload, very rarely is this the only input in our form. Right? We usually have other inputs. So for example, if our form is, let's say something like this on social media, right? If I go to create a post, so this form will includes the encoding type, but I might also put in a description, right? So I might browse. But then I've also got this text area where I could put in other information. So I have a regular input that I'm saving along with my file upload. So let's simulate that, because this causes a common problem. So underneath here, I'm going to put in a regular text box called description. So now the form has two inputs. One of them is a file type, and the other is just a regular text input. So I can choose a file and add some text. So that's fairly simple on the form. The tricky part is on the save page. So now I've used the files array to access the file upload. Which one do I use though to get the text input, the description? Do we use files or post? Okay, everyone says post, you are correct. So even when form includes a file, use post for all non-file input fields. So this is a bit tricky, right? These two inputs, they're part of the same form, but in our PHP script that processes the form post, we access them differently. So any file types we access through the files array, the rest of the inputs we access through the post array. So this is a common mistake I see in student assignments or on final exams where there's a file upload, is students will either use post here or they'll use files for inputs that are not file inputs. So Dominic, yes, you can display it in megabytes, you just have to do the math. So you have to do divided by 1024. That would display it in kilobytes. Yeah, it would be 1024. That's right, divided by 1,000 and in megs, correct. And you could round it. So yes, but I want to leave, I'm going to leave it like this so you see the default, if you just reference the size, you're going to get it in bytes. Okay, it is 12:53, so our simple file upload example is done. I am going to push to Git. Let's take a break. We will come back at 1:05, and then we can start to integrate this process into our existing artist details, save artist, and artist pages. So we'll integrate file uploads with the rest of our application. We can leave these standalone files. Okay, let's take a pause. We'll be back in 10. I will push to Git right now.